Hey everyone, I mentioned a few terms in the Glass Castle when I did my video, and so I wanted to define them for you. So the first one that we're going to go through is trauma. Trauma is a distressing or disturbing experience. So it's an experience that's difficult to forget. It causes an emotional disturbance, and then it can also affect the physical body. I've written down some other things about trauma here. It's an emotional response to a terrible event like an accident. It could be a natural disaster, it could be something else. And immediately after the event, people often experience shock and denial. And then longer term reactions are unpredictable emotions, flashbacks, strained relationships, and then some physical symptoms as well. And so I mentioned that we could see like the mother was reacting out of trauma, like when the cat was kicked out of the car, and she was like, oh, he'll like it better that way. Sort of, that seems like the shock denial bit of reacting to trauma. So I wanted to mention that. Another word I mentioned was delusion. Believing something untrue despite evidence to the contrary. So we see this with the father, where he believes that people are after him. The mother's like, oh, he's talking about the bill collectors. He's not actually talking about the police and the FBI. He's convinced that they have to keep like getting up and moving. He's afraid of hospitals and things like that. And so with delusions, are an unshakable theory or belief in something false and impossible, despite evidence to the contrary. Examples of some of the most common delusions are like someone might believe a billboard or celebrity is sending a message that's meant specifically for them. Delusions are a symptom of several psychological disorders. They include like psychosis. It can happen from substance abuse issues, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder. There's some others too, but those are the main ones that I found online where delusions are present. And then we're going to talk about paranoia, believing someone is out to get you, which is part of a delusion, but we also see that with the father because he's convinced that people are out to get him. He's convinced that like the FBI, the police, the Gestapo, like they're all out to get his family, and so everyone keeps moving around. Or he keeps forcing them to move because he's afraid that they're going to catch up with them. And so that's important as well. Paranoia is a symptom of the same psychological disorders that I mentioned before. And then the cat's name, who was kicked out of the car, was named Quixote, which is really interesting because there's this book called Don Quixote that was written in 1612. It was a book out of Spain and is considered one of the first, it's basically considered the first modern novel. And Don Quixote decides that he is going to live his life as a knight, even though basically knighthood and all that kind of stuff, it was already old fashioned. Like no one was doing that kind of thing anymore. He decided he was going to live his life as a knight and go on an adventure. And one of the things that happens is he goes and he sees all these windmills in the distance and is like, those are giants, I'm going to go fight them. And then when he gets closer, he sees that they're windmills and then decides that, oh, a magician must have turned them into windmills. But what I saw were giants. And so this is, again, a very a very intense delusion where he believes something, and then even though there's evidence that what's happening is not true, what he believes is not true, he just molds and shifts his world to make his view make sense. And then we also see when we see adventure too, and we see that with the family where we see that the father has a lot of delusions, and then but everyone's trying to see it as an adventure because what else are you going to do? Because you can't because basically no one's in control of their own life in that book. The father is dragging them all around the country, trying to find a place where they can make a life, but also being like, we're not going to be here that long, and all the kids know that. Okay, so I hope that was helpful explaining some of the terms that I used in while I was talking about the book, and I'll see you next time.